to an episode of Rediscovered Movies. I'm your host, Nomfanelo. The film that I will be discussing today is Mardko Dard Nahihota, aka The Man Who Feels No Pain, which is a 2018 Indian action comedy film. It is written and directed by Vasan Bala, who's known for directing films such as Jigra and Peddlers. The film stars Abhimanyu Dassani, Radhika Madan, and Gulshan Devaiah. So here is the synopsis. Surya has a lifelong condition that renders him unable to feel or register pain. Soon he decides to learn martial arts and use his abilities to help his biggest idol. So the film premiered at the Toronto Film Festival back in September 2018, where it won the Midnight Madness Award. It was released in theaters in India on March 21st, 2019. In regards to box office, it made $161,000, 161,845 worldwide. In regards to critical reception, it has a 3.4 rating on Letterboxd. It was nominated for 9 Filmfare Awards, including Best Film. And at the time of this recording, it is streaming on Netflix and is on demand, so check your local provider. Okay, let's get into first discoveries. So I remember seeing the trailer for the film. I think it was at the time when this film premiered at TIFF. I saw it online. I'm like, oh, this looks cool. I would love to check this out. And then I must have forgotten about the film at some point, but then years later, I decided, oh, I remember this trailer. Let me watch it again. So when it came down to compiling lists of films to cover for this season, I figured, yeah, like, why not check out this movie? So after watching it on Netflix, I felt like it was okay overall. I really enjoyed the action scenes, they were great. But I would say the story itself could have used more work, um, particularly when it came to the later half of the movie, which I'll get into that point for the lowlights. But let's get into the highlights. So, action scenes, they were fantastic. Now, I previously covered Gondola, and I my one of the issues I had with that movie was the way that the action scenes were shot with the shaky cam, and I'm glad that for this movie there was none of that. I loved that you could see every punch and kick on frame. It looked like the actors did the stunts for the most part, as far as I could tell, but yeah, also too, like those moments were really emphasized with the use of slow motion. It now the use of slow motion might not be favored for some people, but I would say for me, I didn't mind it at all. And also too, like with the choice to use the wide and the close ups, really helped with those scenes. Now, if I were to choose one action scene that I really liked, I would say it was when Surya and Supri are fighting the thugs. In that, was it the alleyway or that where they were trying to rescue the girl that was unconscious inside the car. So yeah, I would say if I had to choose, I would say that scene. Also too, as a highlight, let's talk about our protagonist Surya. So clearly, Surya is a fish out of water character. So as a kid, he's raised by his father, Jatan, and grandfather, Ajoba. And his mom passed away when they were being mugged by chain stealers. I believe that's what the film calls it, as they were on the bike. And essentially, Surya has been sheltered for the majority of his life because his father doesn't want essentially to lose Surya, like after what happened with his mom. And then also too, this there was a huge incident involving Supri's dad on at the roof of the building. So yeah, as a result of that, essentially, Surya is confined to his home. Essentially, now I'm sure he does go out, but for the most part, he has to stay indoors. But he preoccupies his time by watching old like VHS tapes of martial arts movies, but including the one that featured Karate Mani, where he is defeating what 100 people, which is insane. Um, but essentially, like because of that, Surya wants to become a hero and wants to be a hero like Bruce Lee, where he in fact buys this tracksuit trying to look like Bruce Lee, which I thought is kind of cute. And clearly, as he steps more, into the outside world, he is a deer in the headlights, as it's called, because essentially, in ways, he is an outcast just based on how he behaves, and people kind of look at him funny, like as he's wearing the glasses and carrying the backpack that contains his water. I thought the way that it was built is kind of funny and all that stuff. But also, too, he often loves to daydream, especially when in moments where he wants to prove himself to be the hero. He often exaggerates some points, probably to sell, that image of him being the hero and all that stuff. But like in ways, it kind of makes him to be the unreliable narrator. But at the same time, it kind of just gives the audience a glimpse into his world, essentially, as he's been limited to what he's seen on TV with the movies, and also to what his father and grandfather have taught him. So yeah, I think Sirius is quite adorable in this movie, even though he has his limitation. I will say, as a hero, even though he can't feel no pain. I'm glad that there is limitations, because here he has to often drink water. He has to be hydrated, because otherwise, if he's dehydrated, he gets weak. Off of that. So I'm just glad. I'm glad that he has limitations as a superhero, I suppose. And also, too, yeah, like Surya's grandfather is essentially his mentor. Also, too, friend in a way, because since he's only really able to relate to Ijova, because they often spend a lot of time together with like watching the movies and going about in his daily life and all that stuff. And I wonder, like with Ajoba, I wonder if maybe if he saw a bit of himself through Surya, which is why they're probably close. Maybe. Because I think at some point, I don't recall where he lied about something that Surya found out. But yeah, like I find, yeah, the grandfather. I don't mind him in this movie in regards to his role. Also, too, as a highlight, so the film is mostly, I would say, structured from Surya's perspective. As I mentioned, because of him often daydreaming, he often, in ways, is an unreliable narrator on that front. And and yeah, in ways, it kind of shows a glimpse into his world. But I didn't really like that when it came to the later half of the movie, as the other characters are introduced, that just quickly goes away. But but yeah, I would say I didn't really mind it for the most part. And also too, Supri, I find she's a capable fighter as well too, even though she doesn't have superpowers, but she's been trained for quite some time by Mani. and is able to defend herself. So she, as I mentioned, with that fight in the alleyway with the thugs, is an example of her displaying her skills. And even though, like towards the later half, when that impromptu tournament happens, like she gets beaten up. Like for the most part, she's able to hold her own. And I'm glad that since her and Supri are childhood friends, they did not make them to become lovers, because that's often a trope that happens with a lot of movies involving childhood friends. An example would be with the Spider-Man movies with Peter Parker and Mary Jane, or with Gwen Stacy, with Andrew Garfield ones. Yeah, I'm just glad the film didn't go that route. um, you could argue a bit with Bruce Wayne and Rachel in Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, but I would say that romance is more one sided, as Bruce has the feelings towards Rachel, but Rachel, not so much. It's been a while since I've seen those movies, but from what I recall, that's essentially the basis of that relationship. And let's talk about Mani briefly. So, as a karate expert with one leg, man, he was able to he can fight. He can fight. Now, the leg having one leg could obviously be an obstacle for obvious reasons, but somehow he makes it work to his advantage, because if the leg doesn't pan out, he'll use his crutches to defend himself. So there's a, and yeah, like when Surya as a kid watches a tape of Mani beating up the various opponents, I mean that is an example right there to show why Manny is Karate Manny, I suppose. And Jimmy. So he is like the cliche villain, as Surya mentioned in this movie. Now, that could be obviously a negative if you're comparing it to other movies, but I would say for me, for this movie, I didn't mind it too much, I would say. So, with his character, he is Mani's twin brother, and clearly he's jealous of Mani because as a kid, Mani got more attention from his father. Father was like a karate master his own right before he passed away, and then also too, when Mani sleeps with Jimmy's girlfriend, that really created a rift between them, and as a result, Jimmy would often take things from money, including the necklace, which becomes a huge deal towards later half of the movie. And as a villain, though, like it's kind of funny that he decides to hold like this impromptu fight tournament, which I'll get into that for the lowlights section. But in a way, though, like he wants to give his foes a fair chance to fight. So I'll leave it at that. And I do appreciate that the tension is between him and Mani, as opposed to terrorizing people as a gangster. It seems like with Jimmy is more of like a show off, wanting to display the fancy stuff that he has, like with the building and the security team, I suppose. So in a way, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And the music, for the most part, I really enjoyed. Is quite solid, along too with the way the film was shot, with the cinematography and the production design. So that's what I have for the highlights section. Now, for the lowlights, the setup I do appreciate, but however, I think when it came to execution, that needed more work for me, like from a story perspective. And I felt the 2 hour runtime, the 2+ hour runtime didn't help. I think this could have been trimmed, like either by tightening up the pacing or just maybe like trimming it to what, 90 minutes or so, or 100 minutes. 2 hours felt quite excessive for this story, in my opinion. And I felt it was weird that Jimmy wanted to do this whole fight tournament in the later half at wet as he captures Surya, Ajoba, and Supri. I don't know. I just felt like for his character, it felt off. Like maybe like he could have like just tortured them, I suppose, but not this way for determined. That just felt off to me. Also too, so towards the end of the movie, I think during the post credits, Surya decides to become an accountant, which I find is weird. Even though he wants to please his father, there was no indication for him that he wanted to do anything outside of being a hero. I suppose like he wants to do it to help to pay the bills, but that just not makes sense for me at all. Also too, with Monty. So when Surya as a kid watches the tape of Monty fighting the guys in that tournament, uh, it's safe to assume he looked like an adult, but then as we see Surya interact with Mani, they look roughly the same age. Now you could argue Mani could be older based off the look with the scruffy look and the hair and all that stuff, but I was just not convinced like with the age that he's supposed to be just based off the looks, but I just thought it was kind of funny. And lastly, with Surya's father Jatin, when he decides to wear that Tony Stark look with the beard, that just looked off to me. Because since his character is very timid and wants to play things safe, that just felt out of nowhere. Essentially, with that whole look, unless if he was doing it to impress his wife, but yeah, I was not vibing with that look. Let's get into trivia. So, the director Vasan Bala said that in early 2016, a friend of his, told him about a dentist whose patient didn't ask for anesthesia. This triggered the idea of the film to him, and he then saw several documentaries and blended with his childhood stories about martial arts. He said, quote, "The story is about all the films that I grew up on. Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, all the karate classes I had to take." Bala said that the film is a tribute to all the films that we have seen. And I would say that's pretty clear, like especially with how the way things are shot in the action scenes. Yeah, for sure. Like I definitely see those homages. Also too, for the preparation of the role, so the actor that plays Surya trained for martial arts for 3 months before the audition, and also practiced swimming, gymnastics, yoga, freehand training, stick fighting, and studied human anatomy, injuries, and first aid. Interesting. So, also, to the actress that played Supri mentioned that she was auditioning for Layla Majnu, if I'm saying that right, when she got to know about this movie and chose and ended up choosing it because of the uniqueness. She performed all of the stunts herself and watched several classic action films for days to familiarize herself with the genre. She was also injured and bruised during the physical training. She also followed a strict diet and a daily routine of exercises. Also, too, action director and martial arts consultant Pratik Parmar made his acting debut with the film. So he was the guy that played the opponent that injured Surya's leg during that whole impromptu tournament thing. But he also served as the martial arts consultant. And Dasani, the actor that played Surya, went through 1.5 months of auditions with other people. Devaiah, the actor that plays Mani and Jimmy, learned karate while Madan, Supri and Surya, they learned mixed martial arts, and all of them went through almost 8 months of training. Interesting. And last point. So the film only played on 375 screens in India due to a dispute with multiplex cinema companies. Producer Ronnie Screwvala claimed that four multiplex chains were imposing unnecessary fees to Hindi films and filed a grievance with the Competition Commission of India. And in retaliation, Inox Leisure Limited would not play this movie on any of its screens. And these virtual print fees originated in 2010 to help cinemas transition from film prints to digital, but have continued longer than they were supposed to. Wow, that is unfortunate, but probably that explains why the movie did poorly at the box office at the time. All right, so lastly, the big question: should this movie be rediscovered? I say, for me, yes. I would say yes. It's enjoyable. I would say overall, like as an action comedy film, clearly the homages with the action films they work in this movie. Um, I would say like this movie in ways has potential to work as a franchise. Now, I don't think that's going to happen based on its performance, but hey, you never know. Like if enough people watch this movie, it could gain that attention. You never know. And but I would say to be worried of the runtime for this movie, just being over 2 hours long for me just was not necessary on that front. But there is that. So that pretty much concludes this episode of the podcast. So you can find me on Instagram, X, YouTube, and Linktree at Nomfanelo. You can find the podcast on Instagram, X, YouTube, and Linktree at RD Movies Pod. You can visit buymeacoffee.com/RDMoviesPod to donate, which will help to support the podcast. On Spotify app, you can answer the feature poll, leave a comment, and rate the podcast. On Apple Podcasts, you can leave a review and rate the podcast. And you can submit questions, comments, and suggestions by email, which is rediscoveredmovies@gmail.com, to be featured for the after show, which will air after the season finale. So I want to say thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to catch you on the next one.